To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Facade. General Harvey Myers stood 6'3" in his dress uniform, his chest adorned with ribbons that told stories of classified operations across 3 continents. At 42, he commanded the most elite Special Operations Unit in the military, a position that required him to remain in the shadows while lesser men took credit for victories he orchestrated. His marriage to Kristen Stokes had been the envy of their social circle 15 years ago, a beautiful nurse who captured the heart of a rising military star. Harvey had met Kristen during his recovery from shrapnel wounds in Afghanistan. She was 23, fresh out of nursing school, with auburn hair and emerald eyes that seemed to light up when she smiled. He was a decorated captain then, already marked for rapid promotion due to his tactical brilliance and unwavering loyalty. Their courtship was brief but intense, conducted between his deployments and her hospital shifts. Their son, 12-year-old Thomas Myers, was Harvey's pride. The boy possessed his father's analytical mind and his mother's gentle nature, or so Harvey had believed. Thomas excelled in mathematics and showed early promise in strategic thinking, often beating Harvey at chess despite his young age. Harvey had grand plans for his son's future, envisioning him following in the family's military tradition. But Harvey's dedication to his country came at a cost. His missions required months of absence, deep cover operations where contact with family was impossible. Kristen had complained increasingly about the isolation, the single parenting, the fear that gnawed at her during his disappearances. Harvey had dismissed these concerns as the necessary sacrifices of military life, believing his family understood the importance of his work. During his current deployment, a 6-month intelligence operation in Eastern Europe, Harvey maintained his cover as a low-level embassy security guard. To the outside world, including his own family, he was just another soldier doing routine duty. The irony wasn't lost on him that his greatest professional achievement, commanding an elite unit so secret its existence was known only to a handful of Pentagon officials, had to remain completely hidden from those he loved most. What Harvey didn't know was that 6 months into his deployment, Kristen had begun an affair with Dean Caldwell, a local businessman who owned a chain of automotive repair shops. Dean was everything Harvey wasn't, constantly available, emotionally demonstrative, and completely civilian. At 38, Dean had built his business from nothing, possessing the kind of rough charm that appealed to Kristen's growing resentment toward military life. Dean had no idea about Harvey's true rank or position. To him, Harvey was exactly what Kristen had described, a frequently absent soldier who left his beautiful wife to manage everything alone. Dean saw himself as rescuing Kristen from a life of military spouse neglect, and his growing influence over her began to poison her mind against Harvey entirely. The affair had been going on for 8 months when Kristen discovered she was pregnant with Dean's child. The revelation forced a decision she had been avoiding. She would have to leave Harvey and start fresh with Dean. But rather than wait for Harvey's return to handle the situation with any semblance of dignity, Kristen and Dean chose a more callous approach. Chapter 2. The Call That Changed Everything. Harvey was conducting surveillance from a rooftop in Prague when his secure phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number displayed was his home landline, which struck him as odd since Kristen usually called his regular cell phone. He almost ignored it, but something nagged at him. In his line of work, instincts meant survival. Harvey. It wasn't Kristen's voice. A man's voice, unfamiliar and smug. Who is this? Where's my wife? Your wife. Dean laughed, a sound that made Harvey's blood run cold. She's right here, but she's not yours anymore, soldier boy. Harvey's training kicked in immediately. His voice remained steady, but his mind began recording every detail, background noises, speech patterns, emotional state. I'll ask again. Who is this? Dean Caldwell. Kristen's new man. The father of the kid she's carrying. Dean's voice carried the satisfaction of a man who believed he held all the cards. She wanted me to tell you it's over. She's filing for divorce, and you can forget you ever knew them. Harvey could hear movement in the background, then Kristen's voice, distant but clear. Tell him about Thomas. Tell him his precious son doesn't want anything to do with him anymore. Oh, right, Dean continued. Your boy's in a homeless shelter downtown. Been there 2 weeks now. Kristen couldn't handle him acting out after she told him about us, so she had him removed. Kid's probably going to end up in foster care if nobody claims him soon. The words hit Harvey like sniper fire to the chest, but his exterior remained stone. Which shelter? Why? You planning to play daddy from overseas? Face it, Myers, your family's moved on. Kristen's with a real man now, one who's actually here for her. Your son knows the truth about what kind of father abandons his family for months at a time. Harvey closed his eyes, decades of military discipline warring with a rage so pure it threatened to consume him. Where's the shelter? St. Catherine's on 5th Street. But don't bother coming back, Harvey. By the time you get here, we'll be long gone. Kristen and I are starting fresh somewhere you'll never find us. The line went dead. Harvey stared at his phone for 30 seconds, his mind processing the information with the cold efficiency that had made him one of the military's most dangerous men. His wife was pregnant with another man's child. His son was in a homeless shelter. And two people who knew nothing about who he really was had just made the gravest mistake of their lives. He opened his encrypted laptop and began typing orders to his second-in-command, Colonel Byron Ingram. Operation Nightfall, his current mission, was to be transferred to the backup team immediately. He needed to return to the States under deep cover, maintaining his facade as a low-level embassy guard. But his real mission had just changed entirely. Harvey Myers, the man who had orchestrated the downfall of 3 terrorist organizations and 2 foreign governments, was going home to handle a more personal kind of warfare. Chapter 3: The Gathering Storm. Colonel Byron Ingram received Harvey's coded message at 0200 hours and immediately understood the gravity of the situation. He had served under Harvey for 8 years and had never seen his commanding officer request immediate personal leave. The message was brief but clear. Family emergency. Assume command of Operation Nightfall. Maintain all cover protocols for Harvey's return to the United States. Byron knew Harvey well enough to read between the lines. The general wasn't the type of man to abandon a critical mission for anything less than a catastrophe. More concerning was Harvey's request for a complete dossier on 2 civilians, Kristen Stokes Myers and Dean Caldwell. Byron had seen that look in Harvey's eyes before. It was the same cold calculation that preceded some of their most devastating operations. Meanwhile, at Fort Bragg, Master Sergeant Jason Hampton received orders to prepare a special operations package for domestic deployment. The orders came through channels so classified that Jason didn't question the unusual nature of the request. Harvey had handpicked Jason for his team 3 years ago after Jason's exceptional performance during a hostage rescue in Syria. Jason's specialty was intelligence gathering and what the military euphemistically called problem solving. Harvey's flight landed in Atlanta at 0800 hours on a gray October morning. To any observer, he was simply Staff Sergeant Harvey Myers returning from routine embassy duty. His military records, should anyone check, would show him as a mid-level logistics coordinator with an unremarkable service record. The truth, that he commanded a unit with a budget exceeding that of most small nations, remained buried under layers of classification. His first stop was St. Catherine's homeless shelter on 5th Street. The facility was a converted warehouse in a declining neighborhood, the kind of place that society preferred to ignore. Harvey's rage crystallized when he saw his 12-year-old son, Thomas, sitting alone in a corner with a battered backpack and clothes that hadn't been changed in days. "Dad." Thomas looked up with eyes that held far too much pain for someone his age. "Mom said you weren't coming back." Harvey knelt beside his son, and for a moment, the general disappeared entirely. He was just a father whose child had been abandoned. "I'm here now, Thomas. I'm going to take you home." "We don't have a home anymore," Thomas whispered. "Mom sold the house. She said we needed a fresh start without you." As Harvey held his son, he gathered crucial intelligence from the boy's innocent but detailed account of recent events. Kristen had indeed sold their house, a property Harvey had purchased under his actual rank and salary, worth significantly more than a staff sergeant's pay would suggest. The proceeds, nearly $500,000, had disappeared along with Kristen and Dean. Thomas revealed that Dean had been living in their house for months, openly referring to Harvey as "your loser father," and encouraging Thomas to forget about that deadbeat soldier. When Thomas had defended his father, Dean had become verbally abusive. The situation escalated when Kristen told Thomas about the pregnancy and her plans to start a new family. Thomas's refusal to accept Dean as a father figure had led to increasingly harsh punishment, culminating in his abandonment at the shelter. They said I was too difficult, Thomas explained. Dean said real fathers don't abandon their families. And since you abandoned us, you were never a real father anyway. Harvey's jaw clenched as he processed this information. In his son's innocent recounting, he heard the systematic destruction of his family's loyalty, the careful psychological manipulation that had turned his wife against him and traumatized his child. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated campaign to erase him from his own family's life. That evening, Harvey sat in a modest hotel room while Thomas slept fitfully on the adjoining bed. The boy had nightmares now, another consequence of his recent trauma. Harvey opened his encrypted laptop and began the work he did best, planning an operation. His targets had made several critical errors. They had assumed he was powerless, dismissed him as irrelevant, and most importantly, they had hurt his child. In the world of special operations, Harvey was known for his ability to identify an enemy's weakness and exploit it with devastating precision. Now he would apply those same skills to a more personal conflict. Dean Caldwell's business records showed interesting patterns: cash transactions that suggested unreported income, safety violations that had been overlooked by bribed inspectors, and connections to individuals with questionable reputations. Kristen's nursing license had been suspended twice for prescription irregularities, though the charges had been mysteriously dropped. But Harvey wasn't interested in legal consequences. He had something far more sophisticated in mind: a systematic destruction of everything they valued, orchestrated with the same precision he had used to topple enemy networks. They had wanted to erase him from his family's life. Now he would show them what erasure truly meant. As he worked through the night, developing contingencies and backup plans, Harvey made a silent promise to his sleeping son. The people who had hurt Thomas would pay a price that would serve as a warning to anyone who might consider crossing the Myers family again. The general was coming home, and he was bringing war with him. Chapter 4: Shadows and Revelations. 3 days after retrieving Thomas from the shelter, Harvey had established their temporary base of operations in a suburban safe house that officially didn't exist in any government database. The two-story colonial home in Virginia had been purchased through shell companies tied to his special operations budget, providing them with anonymity while he planned his next moves. Thomas was slowly recovering under the care of Dr. Susan Irwin, a military psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery and held the highest security clearances. Harvey had explained only that his son had been through difficult circumstances, but Dr. Irwin's experience with military families made her understand the unspoken complexities. She established a routine of daily sessions with Thomas while Harvey conducted his intelligence gathering. Master Sergeant Jason Hampton arrived at the safe house carrying multiple false identities and a dossier that made Harvey's expression turn arctic. Jason's investigation had revealed that Dean and Kristen's relationship was far more calculated than a simple affair. Phone records showed that Dean had been actively researching Harvey's background for months, trying to determine his true financial status and military rank. "Sir," Jason reported, "Caldwell's been working an angle from the beginning. He hired a private investigator to dig into your records, but your cover held. As far as they know, you're exactly what you appear to be, a mid-level soldier with limited assets." Harvey studied the surveillance photos Jason had taken. Dean and Kristen were currently living in a luxury rental property in South Carolina, far more expensive than Dean's legitimate business income could support. They had used Harvey's house sale proceeds to fund their new lifestyle, believing they had successfully stolen a modest nest egg from a powerless soldier. "There's more, sir," Jason continued. "Caldwell's been telling people that Kristen was married to an abusive deadbeat who abandoned his family. He's positioning himself as her rescuer, and she's playing along. They're planning to disappear completely once the baby's born." Harvey's silence stretched long enough to make Jason uncomfortable. When the general finally spoke, his voice carried the quiet menace that his enemies had learned to fear. "They want to disappear," Harvey said. "We're going to help them with that." The next phase of Harvey's operation required a delicate touch. He couldn't simply confront Dean and Kristen directly. That would be the action of an emotional husband seeking revenge. Instead, he would orchestrate their destruction with the same systematic precision he had used against terrorist networks. Harvey's first move was to establish surveillance on their South Carolina location using local assets. Through his network of former special operations personnel now working in the private sector, he arranged for round-the-clock monitoring of their activities, communications, and associations. Dean and Kristen had no idea they were now living under the scrutiny of professionals who could track a target across 3 continents. The intelligence gathered was illuminating. Dean's automotive business was struggling financially, kept afloat only by the money from Harvey's house sale. More interesting were Dean's evening activities, regular visits to underground poker games where he was accumulating significant debts to individuals who didn't accept late payments graciously. Kristen, meanwhile, was already showing signs of strain. Her pregnancy was difficult, and Dean's attention was waning as the reality of supporting a family replaced the excitement of an affair. She had attempted to contact Harvey twice through official military channels, but those messages had been intercepted and rerouted to Jason's monitoring station. "She's trying to reach you, sir," Jason reported during their evening briefing. "Messages are getting increasingly desperate. She's realizing that Caldwell isn't the man she thought he was." Harvey's expression didn't change. "Log the messages, but don't respond." She made her choice when she abandoned Thomas in that shelter. Dr. Irwin's reports on Thomas showed steady progress, but the boy's questions about his mother were becoming more frequent and pointed. Thomas was old enough to understand that his parents' marriage was over, but he struggled with the abandonment and the lies he had been told about his father. "He's asking when he'll see his mother again," Dr. Irwin reported. "I've been deflecting, but he needs some kind of closure. Have you considered supervised contact?" Harvey's answer was immediate and final. Kristen Myers abandoned her son in a homeless shelter to start a new life with another man. Thomas will have no contact with her until he's old enough to understand exactly what kind of person she chose to become. That night, Harvey received a call from Byron Ingram. Operation Nightfall had concluded successfully, but Byron's real purpose was to check on his commanding officer's mental state. "Harvey, you've been off the grid for 2 weeks. The Pentagon's starting to ask questions about your personal leave. Tell them it's family-related and classified," Harvey replied. "I need another month." "What are you planning to do with these people?" Harvey's pause was telling. "The same thing we do with any threat to operational security. We eliminate it." "Harvey, these are civilians. American citizens. Your wife." "My wife died the day she put my son in a homeless shelter," Harvey said quietly. "What's left is just a target who made the mistake of declaring war on the wrong soldier." Chapter 5. The Web Titans. 2 weeks into November, Harvey's operation entered its active phase. Dean Caldwell's gambling debts had reached a critical threshold, and Harvey had arranged for those debts to be purchased by individuals who operated under his indirect influence. What Dean didn't know was that his creditors now answered to a man who had toppled governments. The first pressure point came when Dean's automotive shops began failing their safety inspections with devastating consistency. Violations that had been overlooked for years were suddenly being documented with forensic precision. The local business license authority received anonymous tips about unreported cash transactions, triggering audits that Dean couldn't afford to fight. Kristen's situation was deteriorating in parallel. Her attempts to secure employment were being subtly sabotaged through Harvey's network of contacts in the medical field. References were checked and found to be concerning. Background investigations revealed her suspended nursing license and raised questions about her professional reliability. Jason Hampton had established a forward observation post in a rental property that provided line-of-sight surveillance of Dean and Kristen's home. His reports painted a picture of a relationship crumbling under financial and emotional pressure. "Caldwell's drinking heavily," Jason reported. "Kristen's been crying a lot, and they're fighting almost daily. She's 5 months pregnant and realizing that her Prince Charming is actually a loser who can't pay his bills." Harvey studied the surveillance footage with clinical detachment. "What about the private investigator Caldwell hired? Paid him off and got access to his entire file on you. Caldwell's been trying to figure out if you have hidden assets he could go after in the divorce. He's convinced there's money he's missing." "Interesting," Harvey mused. "He's still thinking like a predator. Time to show him what real predation looks like." The next phase of Harvey's plan required a more personal touch. He needed Dean and Kristen to understand that their situation wasn't random bad luck. It was the result of crossing someone far more dangerous than they had imagined. But the revelation had to come at the perfect moment, when they were most vulnerable and least able to respond effectively. Harvey's opportunity came when Dean's gambling debts reached the point where his creditors demanded immediate payment. The men who came to collect were professionals who understood exactly how much pressure to apply without crossing legal lines. Dean was given 48 hours to produce $50,000 or face consequences that were described in vivid detail. Desperate, Dean convinced Kristen to contact Harvey directly, believing they could extort money from him by threatening to keep him from seeing Thomas. They had no idea that Harvey already had custody of his son and had documented every aspect of their abandonment of the boy. Kristen's call came to Harvey's secure line at 2 a.m. "Harvey? It's Kristen. We need to talk." Harvey's voice remained perfectly controlled. "About what?" "About Thomas. About us. I made some mistakes. You put my son in a homeless shelter and disappeared with another man's child in your belly. I wouldn't call those mistakes. I'd call them choices." Kristen's breath caught. Harvey's tone was unlike anything she had ever heard from him. Cold, clinical, and utterly without emotion. "Harvey, please. Dean owes some people money, and they're threatening us. I'm pregnant, and I'm scared. I just need—" "You need $50,000, Harvey interrupted. "I know about Dean's gambling debts. I know about the poker games. I know about the men who visited him yesterday." The silence on the line stretched for 15 seconds. "How do you know that?" Kristen whispered. "The same way I know you've been trying to get a nursing job and keep getting rejected. The same way I know Dean's businesses are failing their inspections. The same way I know exactly where you are right now." Kristen's voice became shrill with fear. "What are you saying? Are you watching us?" Harvey's laugh was devoid of humor. "Kristen, you really have no idea who you decided to betray, do you?" Chapter 6. The Revelation. Dean Caldwell was pacing their kitchen when Kristen hung up the phone, her face pale with terror. "What did he say?" "Will he give us the money?" Dean demanded. "Dean," Kristen whispered, "I think we made a terrible mistake." Before Dean could respond, every electronic device in their house activated simultaneously. Televisions, radios, computers, and even their smart home system began broadcasting the same signal. The screens showed a live feed of their kitchen, filmed from an impossible angle that revealed the recording device was inside their home. Harvey's face appeared on every screen, but this wasn't the man they thought they knew. The person staring back at them wore the insignia of a general, surrounded by flags and military decorations that spoke of operations they couldn't imagine. Dean Caldwell and Kristen Myers. Harvey's voice filled their home with mechanical precision. "You're looking at General Harvey Myers, commander of Special Operations Command. Your husband isn't a mid-level embassy guard, Kristen. He's one of the 12 most powerful military officers in the United States." Dean's face went white as the implications crashed over him. "That's impossible. She said you were just a—" "I said what I was supposed to say," Harvey's image continued. "My rank is classified at levels above congressional oversight. My operational budget exceeds the GDP of most nations. And you just made the mistake of targeting my family." Kristen collapsed into a chair, her hands trembling. "Harvey, I didn't know. I thought. You thought you were stealing from a powerless soldier who couldn't fight back." Harvey's voice cut through her protests. "You abandoned our son in a homeless shelter because you believed I was weak. You've spent months telling people I was an abusive deadbeat because you thought I couldn't defend myself." Dean's criminal mind was already working, seeing opportunity even in catastrophe. "Look, we can work this out. Give us the money we need, and we'll disappear. You'll never see us again." Harvey's smile was terrifying in its complete absence of warmth. "You will disappear, Dean, but not in the way you think." The screens went black for 3 seconds, then displayed new images, surveillance footage of every move Dean and Kristen had made for the past month. Their private conversations, their intimate moments, their arguments and fears, all captured in high definition by equipment they never knew existed. "The $50,000 you owe to those very dangerous men? That debt has been purchased by individuals who answer to me. Your automotive business licenses? Revoked. Your rental property? The lease has been terminated for violations you didn't know you were committing. Your bank accounts? Frozen pending investigation of unreported income." Kristen was crying now, the stress threatening her pregnancy. "Harvey, please. I'm carrying a baby." "You're carrying Dean's baby," Harvey corrected. The same baby you conceived while my son was living in our house, watching his mother betray his father. That child will be born into the world you chose to create. Dean's desperation made him reckless. You can't do this. We'll go to the police, to the media. We'll tell them what you're doing. Harvey's expression didn't change. With what evidence? Official records show you as a failed businessman who abandoned his family obligations and fled from legitimate debts. Kristen's medical records will show a woman with a history of prescription drug abuse who abandoned her child to pursue a relationship with a criminal. That's not true. Kristen protested. Truth is what can be proven, Harvey replied. And I have access to resources that can prove anything I need to prove. The final image that appeared on their screens was Thomas, sitting in a comfortable room, doing homework, looking healthy and content for the first time in months. My son has been asking about his mother, Harvey said. I've been trying to figure out how to explain that she chose to abandon him for a life with another man. But children are resilient. Thomas will grow up knowing that his father protected him from people who were willing to throw him away. Dean grabbed Kristen's arm. We need to run. Now. Harvey's voice followed them as they moved toward their bedroom. Run where, Dean? I've been tracking enemy combatants across 3 continents for 20 years. You're a small-town businessman who thinks he's clever because he can cheat at poker. This isn't a fair fight. It's an extermination. The house went silent except for their ragged breathing. Then, methodically, their utilities began shutting down. Electricity, water, gas, internet. Each service was terminated with electronic precision. In the darkness, Kristen's phone rang one final time. You have 12 hours to vacate the property. Harvey's voice was calm and professional. Transportation has been arranged to take you to a location where you can reflect on the choices that led you here. Do not attempt to contact law enforcement, the media, or any mutual acquaintances. Those avenues have been closed to you. Where are you taking us? Dean's voice cracked with fear. Somewhere you can disappear completely, Harvey replied. Just like you wanted. The line went dead, and in the darkness, they heard the sound of vehicles surrounding their house. Chapter 7. Into the Void. The vehicles that surrounded Dean and Kristen's house belonged to a private security company that specialized in what they euphemistically called relocation services. These men had extracted targets from hostile territories around the world, and moving 2 terrified civilians from South Carolina to an undisclosed location was routine work. Harvey watched the operation unfold from his command center in Virginia, where Thomas was safely asleep under Dr. Irwin's care. The boy's recovery was progressing well, but Harvey knew the final step in his son's healing would come only when Thomas understood that the people who had hurt him could never hurt him again. The transport took Dean and Kristen to a facility in rural Montana that didn't appear on any official maps. To the outside world, it was a private retreat center for corporate executives seeking digital detox programs. In reality, it was a black site facility where individuals who had crossed certain powerful interests were held while their fates were decided. Their accommodations were Spartan but not uncomfortable, a converted shipping container equipped with basic amenities and constant surveillance. They had no means of communication with the outside world and no idea where they were or how long they would remain there. Dean's attempts to negotiate with their guards were met with professional indifference. These men had contained far more dangerous individuals than a small-town auto dealer with gambling debts. Kristen's pregnancy made her situation more delicate, but medical care was provided by a doctor who asked no questions and kept no records. Meanwhile, Harvey was orchestrating the systematic erasure of Dean and Kristen's previous lives. Their identities were being methodically destroyed through channels that operated beyond legal oversight. Credit histories disappeared, employment records were altered, and social connections were severed through carefully crafted explanations that painted them as fugitives from justice. Jason Hampton's role in the operation was crucial. He was tasked with creating the documentation that would support whatever narrative Harvey ultimately decided to impose. Birth certificates, death certificates, marriage licenses, criminal records, all could be manufactured or modified with the resources at Harvey's disposal. Sir, Jason reported during their daily briefing, the targets are contained and isolated. What's the endgame here? Harvey's answer revealed the depth of his planning. Dean Caldwell and Kristen Myers are going to disappear completely. New identities will be created for them in a location where they can't harm anyone else. They'll live under constant surveillance for the rest of their lives, with the understanding that any attempt to contact their previous lives will result in immediate consequences. And the baby? Harvey's expression hardened. The child will be placed with a family that can provide appropriate care. Dean and Kristen have demonstrated that they're unfit parents through their abandonment of Thomas. Dr. Irwin had been monitoring Thomas's progress carefully, and her report was encouraging. The boy was regaining his confidence and had stopped having nightmares about being abandoned. However, she raised concerns about Harvey's emotional state. Thomas is asking harder questions about his mother, she reported. He wants to know if she's safe, if she's thinking about him. I've been deflecting, but he deserves some kind of truth. Harvey considered this carefully. His son needed closure, but the truth about what Harvey had done to Dean and Kristen would traumatize the boy in different ways. The solution, Harvey decided, would be a carefully crafted narrative that protected Thomas while ensuring he understood the consequences of betrayal. Schedule a session with Thomas for tomorrow evening, Harvey instructed. It's time he learned some important lessons about loyalty and consequences. Chapter 8. Lessons in Loyalty. The conversation between Harvey and Thomas took place in the safe house's living room, with Dr. Irwin present to monitor the boy's emotional state. Thomas had grown several inches during his ordeal and was beginning to show the early signs of the man he would become. Harvey saw himself in his son's eyes, the same analytical intelligence, the same capacity for loyalty, and unfortunately, the same potential for ruthless judgment. Thomas, Harvey began, it's time we talked about your mother and what happened to our family. The boy straightened in his chair, displaying the same attention to authority that Harvey had been teaching him since birth. Is she coming back, Dad? No, son, she's not. But I want you to understand why, and what it means for us going forward. Harvey had prepared for this conversation carefully, crafting a narrative that was truthful without being traumatic. He explained that Kristen had made choices that showed she was no longer the person they had loved. She had chosen to start a new family with another man and had decided that Thomas wasn't part of her future. But why did she put me in that place? Thomas asked, his voice small. Because she was thinking only about herself and what she wanted, Harvey replied. She forgot the most important rule our family has always lived by. We protect each other, no matter what. Thomas absorbed this information with the gravity of someone far older than his 12 years. What happens to people who break that rule? Harvey's answer would shape his son's understanding of justice for the rest of his life. They face consequences that match their choices. Your mother chose to abandon you, so she's lost the right to be part of your life. The man she chose over our family will learn that there are prices to pay for hurting children. Are they in trouble? They're exactly where they belong, Harvey said. And you never have to worry about them hurting you again. Dr. Irwin observed the interaction with growing concern. Thomas's acceptance of his mother's abandonment was healthy, but his apparent satisfaction with the idea of consequences troubled her. She recognized the signs of a child who was learning to suppress empathy in favor of black-and-white thinking about justice and revenge. After Thomas went to bed, she voiced her concerns to Harvey. He's internalizing your worldview about betrayal and consequences. That's not necessarily healthy for a 12-year-old. Harvey's response was immediate and firm. Thomas needs to understand that loyalty matters and that there are real consequences for betrayal. The world is full of people who will try to take advantage of kindness. I won't have him grow up to be a victim. But you're teaching him to be something else entirely, Dr. Irwin warned. You're creating a child who believes that revenge is justice and that forgiveness is weakness. I'm creating a child who will never be abandoned again, Harvey corrected. Thomas will grow up knowing exactly who he can trust and what happens to people who betray that trust. Meanwhile, in Montana, Dean and Kristen's situation was deteriorating. The stress of captivity, combined with Kristen's pregnancy complications, was taking its toll. Dean had attempted to escape twice, only to be recaptured within hours by teams that tracked him with military precision. Their captors provided medical care, but no information about their future. Kristen's pregnancy was progressing, but the stress was causing complications that concerned the facility's medical staff. Dean's mental state was becoming increasingly unstable as he realized the full scope of Harvey's power and resources. We have to find a way to contact someone, Dean insisted during one of their whispered conversations. This is kidnapping. False imprisonment. We have rights. Kristen's response revealed how completely her worldview had changed. Do we? We abandoned his son, Dean. We left a 12-year-old boy in a homeless shelter because he wouldn't accept you as his father. What rights do people like us deserve? You're talking crazy, Dean hissed. We made mistakes, but this is insane. He's holding us prisoner. We held his son prisoner too, Kristen replied. In that shelter, with no idea if his father was ever coming back. How is this different? Dean's realization that Kristen was beginning to break psychologically marked the beginning of the final phase of Harvey's operation. Chapter 9. The End of All Things. 3 months after Dean and Kristen's disappearance, Harvey received the final reports that would close their chapter forever. Kristen had given birth to a healthy daughter, who was immediately placed with a carefully selected family through channels that ensured the adoption could never be traced back to Harvey's operation. Dean and Kristen were provided with new identities and relocated to a remote area of Alaska, where they would live under constant but invisible surveillance for the rest of their lives. Their new names were unremarkable, their backgrounds designed to ensure they would never rise above subsistence-level existence. Any attempt to contact their previous lives or to seek revenge would trigger responses that Dean, at least, was intelligent enough to fear. The beauty of Harvey's solution was its completeness. Dean and Kristen hadn't been killed, they had been erased. Their families believed they had fled from financial troubles and criminal debts. Their friends assumed they had started new lives elsewhere. There was no mystery to investigate, no crime to solve, just 2 people who had made bad choices and disappeared into the kind of anonymity that millions of Americans lived in every day. Thomas was thriving under his father's care and the guidance of carefully selected tutors who understood the boy's unique situation. At 13, he was already showing the analytical skills and emotional control that marked him as Harvey's true heir. More importantly, he had absorbed the lessons Harvey had taught him about loyalty, consequences, and the price of betrayal. Dr. Irwin's final report on Thomas was mixed. The boy had recovered completely from his abandonment trauma and showed no signs of emotional instability. However, his worldview had been fundamentally altered by his experiences and his father's teachings. Thomas understands that his mother chose to abandon him, she wrote. He's accepted that choice and moved on. But he's also internalized a very black-and-white view of human relationships. He believes that people are either completely loyal or completely untrustworthy, with no middle ground. This may serve him well in certain environments, but it could limit his ability to form normal relationships. Harvey read the report with satisfaction. Normal relationships had never been a priority for the Myers family. What mattered was loyalty, competence, and the strength to defend what was important. On a cold December evening, Harvey and Thomas stood on the deck of their new home, a fortress-like structure in rural Virginia that provided both security and privacy. Thomas was reviewing intelligence reports as part of his advanced education, learning to think like the strategic mind his father was training him to become. "Dad," Thomas said, "do you ever think about Mom?" Harvey's answer was immediate and final. "I think about the lesson she taught us. Trust must be earned and maintained. Betray that trust, and you lose everything that mattered. Your mother and the man she chose taught us both something valuable about the price of disloyalty." Thomas nodded, accepting this wisdom with the gravity of someone far older than his 13 years. "Will I ever see her again?" "No," Harvey replied. "And that's exactly as it should be. We protect what's ours, Thomas. We're loyal to those who earn it. And we make sure that anyone who tries to hurt our family understands the consequences of that choice." As they stood together in the cold night air, father and son bound by shared understanding of loyalty and revenge, Harvey felt the satisfaction of a mission completed successfully. Dean and Kristen had learned that some enemies were too dangerous to cross. Thomas had learned that family loyalty was absolute, and that betrayal carried a price that could never be paid in full. The general had come home, and he had brought justice with him. In the darkness of the Alaskan wilderness, Dean Caldwell stared out the window of their small cabin and wondered if Harvey Myers was watching them even now. The man who had once thought he was stealing from a powerless soldier now understood that he had declared war on someone who waged conflict on a level he could never comprehend. Kristen had stopped talking about their daughter months ago. The child was better off with her new family, far from the shadow of the choices her biological parents had made. Some debts, they had learned, could only be paid with everything you once believed belonged to you. And in Virginia, Thomas Myers was learning that the most important lesson his father could teach him was simple. Never forgive those who betray you. Never forget those who remain loyal. And never underestimate the price that people will pay for crossing the wrong family. The Myers name would be remembered for loyalty and feared for justice. That was Harvey's gift to his son, a legacy that would protect the boy for the rest of his life, as long as he never forgot the lessons learned from his mother's betrayal. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.